finally, affordable, accessible, and high-quality childcare for more Washington families.
Adding your own flavor to fashion comes with age.
Okay, Dad, look at you.
Forgetting how to add doesn't. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's. Some things come with age, some others don't.
Good morning. I would like to call performance audit for Pierce County. Today is February 26th, 2025. The time is 10:01. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Thank you. Councilmember Ayala.
Here.
Councilmember Krueger.
Here.
Julie DeMuth.
Here.
Tanisha Lyons.
Here.
Thank you. Michael Transu.
Excused.
And Councilmember Hitchen.
Here.
You have 5 members present.
5 members. We do have a quorum this morning. Thank you all for making time. We have our agenda before us. Any changes to the agenda as presented? Seeing none, we'll consider the agenda approved. We also have minutes from January 22nd, 2025. Are there any changes or edits to the minutes found by colleagues? Seeing none, we will consider the January 22nd, 2025 minutes approved. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 5, which is the proposed contract for juvenile court study.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Bill.
Your names are flipped. It just caught me for a second.
Okay, fixed. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. The first item on the agenda is a proposed contract for an evaluation of juvenile court. Just to remind the committee, in November of 2023, implementing the biennial budget, the council included legislation that provided, with the proviso that the committee included analysis of Pierce County juvenile court structure, practices, and programmings for the purposes of identifying opportunities to reduce youth violence, work with youth while in custody at Raymond Hall, those youth and diversion programs, and promote overall public safety. At the November 14th special meeting of this committee, the committee approved a scope of work for a request for proposals to conduct the study. After discussions with potential contractors in line with county procurement regulations, staff is proposing that the scope of work and the RFP be split between staff, performance audit committee staff working on the data analysis parts of this, along with the administrative office of the courts at the state, and the second part be working with the University of Washington CoLab for Community and Behavioral Health Policy, would be conducting a review of the alternatives programs offered by the court, looking at gaps in that and looking at the potential programs for the facility. And I've attached a proposed draft contract, which I will go into in a second. I'd also like to note that the court has had some comments on this draft, and so I won't be asking the committee to approve it today. I want to have a chance to incorporate those comments, but I also wanted the chance for the committee to give any feedback to include when I incorporate the court's comments. Just a little bit of background, the UW CoLab for Community and Behavioral Health Policy would be working on identification of the obligations of the court and expectations of the public to be contrasted with the actual legal obligations of the court, and an analysis of the court's alternatives to incarceration or charging. CoLab specializes in research on youth in the criminal justice system, including behavioral health needs, and have previously worked with juvenile court on an evaluation of one of their probation programs. So specifically, what we are proposing that the UW CoLab work on is identifying policymaker and public expectations. That's to look for policymakers and other county representatives to gain an understanding of what they believe the limits or the reach of the juvenile court is. And that's to contrast with the definition that Joe Eisenman and myself will be looking on what the court can actually legally do. And then to look at system frameworks for legal involvement and youth violence. So just basically providing some background on somewhat of the history of what juvenile courts do and some of the philosophies about juvenile justice for background. And then looking at the court's alternatives to incarceration, basically documenting all of those, identifying through interviews and also through some of the data analysis work that staff will be doing, the behavioral health needs of juveniles that are coming into the system, identifying and using this data a lot, not just for behavioral health, but all of the, I guess you'd call it environmental data, to identify gaps in the programs that are used by the courts, and then looking to see, looking at equitability of those programs, and then the impact on youth violence of those programs. And then finally, using that information, analyzing some of the capabilities of the court to provide those programs either in the facility or outside in the community, and kind of providing some analysis on the effectiveness of those approaches. So I'll take a minute to highlight what I think the court's concerns were, which I think can be addressed. First was to make sure that we are looking at the actual legal obligations of the court and not just taking into account what policymakers or people in the county think should be happening, but really to weigh that against what they are required to do and what the limits of their authority is. Second, they wanted to make sure that we looked at the broader systemic factors that contribute to youth violence, including poverty, education, community disinvestment, and things like that, which we certainly will take into account. And then also to look at how they collaborate with other systems. And I think, this was all reflected in the RFP scope of work, and I think didn't quite translate as I wrote it into a contract. But clearly, I think we would be looking at that with UW. And then finally, to make sure that we work with other Pierce County departments that have interaction with the court. But I will make sure that that we are on the same page.
Thank you for that. And I know I also received the letter this morning, and definitely was not my intent, and thought that we had landed where we were in the right space. And it appears that there needs to be some further conversation as this is an assessment or a performance audit of our juvenile justice system. I want to make sure that what we're doing is helping and supporting the work of our juvenile courts and the work that's happening there. So getting their voice embedded in this document is really important to this committee. I think that really was our intent, is to make things better. So looking for other feedback or questions that colleagues have about this particular scope of work that's here. And I know this is new to Councilmember Ayala, and Ms. Newth, I don't know how much you were copying and following along last year, but if you have feedback or questions that might be helpful, appreciate hearing them. Ms. Newth.
Thank you, Chair Hitchin. I had just noted a couple items, and I think much of perhaps what I noted aligns with what the court also provided in their letter. But just in terms of the scope of work, really clearly delineating between what the operational and statutory requirements of the court are versus I think what we're looking for is information around youth violence prevention and those efforts, and it sounds like it's even broader than that. And then just wanting to note that in terms of youth violence prevention, the value we would likely have in community input in that area, particularly those with lived experience, so we could look at the effectiveness of the programs that are offered. And then the need to comprehensively evaluate the system. So of course our other funding sources here at the county are violence prevention dollars, as well as the work that's being done within school districts. And I think there's broader programs as well. And then the last item I had noted, I think at 2.2 and maybe in task 2.3, 2.2 states what additional programming they would implement given additional resources. Given I help oversee the budget, I just want to underscore that we likely don't have additional resources to put towards programs, so really focusing on what proven best practices are and what's most effective given the limited resources that the county does have. So what, if we need to expand program, how do we ensure that we're effectively utilizing the resources that we currently have?
Thank you for that. Committee Member Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. There's, and I'm a little newer to this work, so just holding that as a frame. In reviewing this information, I just wanted to make sure that as we present the work, that we have clear definitions and understanding.
Committee Member Ayala, can you move your mic?
Sorry. Yes. That we have clear understandings of very common phrases, so things like defining violent offenses and being very clear what violent offenses means, or any other common terminology that where we may have some discrepancy in understanding of what that is. Additionally, I did want to surface, and forgive me if I missed this, but as we think of the intersectionality of who is being impacted, having disaggregated data, I'm thinking particularly around zip code of residence, race and ethnicity, and also age. I don't know if any one of those are embedded in some of the other data points, but just bringing that up as a topic that could potentially support further work.
Thank you for those comments. Committee Member Lyons, just want to make sure that you don't have anything or questions. I'm not seeing your hand, so just wanted to make sure because of technology. Vice Chair Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if this is the proper timing on this, but looking at what is included in this, whereas I was looking at some things going on across the country, and I see that in, I believe it's Arkansas, they started a pilot program, and this was the, what they call it, it was no cell phones. And they found 51% difference in drop in drug use in the schools that since they implemented the no phone policy, and they saw aggression and behavioral problems dropped by 50%. And I think it was the bell to bell, no cell, it was called. And I didn't know if that could be part of this, in incorporating that, or even if we have any kind of an authority at a council level, or perhaps doing a recommendation if the state needs to do that, or if the Department of Education or Superintendent of Public Instruction might.
Definitely something to look at. I have a feeling our local school districts and the school boards there might get a little upset if we started doing things, but we could ask the health department to do recommendations on that. I know the school that I taught at said no cell phones, and it was an interesting challenge initially, but once kids got used to it, it was really helpful. And I know there's other places that have done that as well.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm wondering if in something like this is pertinent to have that information to share, even though we may not have authority, but it is affecting, the budgets that we put out in the programs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how we would put it in this, but it's definitely, I know it's on our Health and Human Services list to really look at the impacts of technology and youth. And when you talk about youth mental health, technology, and the lack of social interaction when they're just staring at a phone and everything can be falsified, or glamorized, or all the things, it's problematic. But we can think about it or see if there's any best practices, especially those that maybe are out in community or in programming, or are we actually, if cyberbullying is what turned into a violent offense, are we doing any investigation as the impacts of technology on causation of youth would be maybe within the scope?
Yes, that's, or as I was reading this, it was looking at programs that are effective. And so that's where this was. And another thing I looked up, and I don't know where the notes are, and I don't even know how we could do it, but when there are, I want to say camps of some sort where it would be very expensive, but not that addressing these issues isn't. But even like working on a ranch or working on a farm, other job experiences that are like from sun up to sundown, perhaps, where they're learning, discipline, self-discipline things, and responsibilities. So,
okay, I bet that would fall under that best practices if there are programs out there. If they're looking at, is the goal, Mr. Vetter, to look beyond Washington State as well?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. They're looking at things nationally to compare programs. I think the link with this study is looking at things that impact youth violence, then showing where the court is limited, but then also exploring what community partnerships could happen to make that connection.
Further comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee Member Lyons.
Yes, thank you. So I have a clarifying question. So what we are looking for right now are gaps in the juvenile justice services, correct? Or is that something that we have not considered?
Mr. Vetter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, certainly identifying gaps in services that would reduce youth violence is definitely part of this.
Okay, so I do have a list, quite a comprehensive list. For looking for gaps in the juvenile justice services, one would be systemic barriers to equitable justice, and so which would be a lack of alternative sentencing programs, behavioral health support deficiencies, and inadequate program accessibility. And then disparities in youth outcomes would be unequal distribution of deferrals, impact of the state intake shutdown, the WSAC lawsuit and state intake shutdown should be looked at. The limited data on recidivism and effectiveness. While programs exist, the report does highlight a need for better data tracking on whether these interventions reduce youth reoffending. And so inequities in community and legal interventions, structural barriers to youth support such as lack of early intervention. Many youth who are entering the system have already faced poverty, lack of educational access, or systemic neglect. So looking at gaps in community partnerships, the audit suggests that community-based interventions could be stronger, and limited engagement with families. Programs designed to prevent recidivism and reintegrate youth into society may not fully incorporate family involvement. And then, of course, racial and economic disparities, higher arrest and detention rates for marginalized youth. Data mapping is needed to assess whether youth of color face disproportionate contact with the system. Unequal resource distribution. Certain programs might favor specific demographic groups over others, limiting effectiveness for low-income youth and BIPOC communities. And so, my key recommendations to address these gaps would be to expand alternative programs, including to increase funding for diversion programs, mental health support and restorative justice initiatives, improve equity in sentencing, such as an audit and correct disparities in deferral approvals, probation assignments, and sentencing practices. And then also we need to enhance data collection and transparency. We need to require more granular data tracking on recidivism, success rates, and racial disparities. And so, yeah, and then assess and address structural barriers.
Thank you for all of that. Committee Member Lyons, is it possible that you have that typed up and would be willing to email it? I mean, we can watch the recording. Sure. We can watch the recording. My staff were trying to write stuff down pretty quickly, and you had a lot of really good details in there. We want to make sure we capture that. So you can send it to me, or you can send it to Mr. Vetter and Mr. Eisman, and we can make sure that they go through that and see where it aligns with the current plan for this study, and then if there's changes. And then it's also just helpful when we do get a contractor that they're aware of these or some of the things that we're thinking about.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your feedback and the level of detail there. I think for me, the one question that I just in general, looking at the original scope of work, in task 2, it talks about using interviews with court leaders and staff, and then it says 2 to 5. And Mr. Vetter, I was just wondering, is that 2 court leaders and 2 staff, or because it's and, is it just 2 people?
I believe the intent is for 5 total. 5 total of the court and staff of the court.
So then 5 total in general, so it could be 3 court, 2 staff, that kind of thing, or just they're all court staff in general?
Court staff, including court leaders, so
Okay.
however we define court leaders, I guess.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out if it was 2 or 4, because it was 2 of each, right? So,
I will clarify.
yeah, so, and I'm very sure the people that do this work would know how to interpret that. And then appreciate the comments from committee member Demuth and Lyons and my colleagues here on the council. I think bringing this back next month and maybe a draft can be shared early on with the courts. Mm-hmm. And one of the disconnects could be that this is just for the part that's going out, so making sure that they understand that the part that they were mentioning, the court part, the legal part, is happening, but we're doing it with a different scope of work that we didn't maybe outline in here.
Correct.
Okay.
And we will also be bringing a separate contract with Administrative Office of the Courts because we will have some costs associated with getting data from them.
Okay. Okay.
Next month as well.
So that may have been part. And at the end of the day, we'll go to committee member or Vice Chair Kruger first.
Well, thank you, Chair. Maybe I'm missing something, but it goes task 1, task 2, task 5. Is that a typo?
Thank you for pointing that out. I will fix that.
Those are 2 separate hands. Yeah, let's see, 5, yeah.
Right. Should be task 3.
3 and then 3.13. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
I had the same question, just okay. I think one of the end points, when we originally started talking about this last year, really was around Raymond Hall as a facility, the physical location, the use of that facility, and is it meeting the needs of our county when we think about how we are working with juvenile courts now, with offenders, with families, with victims, and is the facility and the services provided, do they mesh? And as we think about currently someday we will need to replace or remodel, wouldn't it be good to know exactly that the facility needs could be met and having that? So one of the reasons that we were looking at this really was, what are the best practices so that we can design a building or remodel a building to meet what is the current best practices? What are the needs as we move forward? Was one of those intentional thoughts around bringing this forward, because we want to design a building that will work for what's going to work for our residents in Pierce County. And this was one of the ways to do that, is to kind of make people sit down and talk about what's working, what's not working, how do we design the system, and then once we know the system, the building can be built for a system, I guess is what I was looking for. So any further feedback for Mr. Vetter, or any questions from you or Mr. Eisman? Okay. Seeing none, we will look forward to seeing this next month, and we will go on to item number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just a discussion of the regular meeting time. The committee sets the regular meeting time, and so the chair wanted to raise the opportunity to change it depending on people's schedules. Right now, it seems like from the council members' perspective, Wednesdays and Thursdays, there's one Wednesday that's not available, one regular Wednesday that's not available, but otherwise, I believe it's the second Wednesday of each month, they'll be doing Council of the Whole meetings. But otherwise, Wednesday or Thursday for committee members to consider as an alternate time based on your schedules.
Thank you for that. And yeah, Wednesdays and Thursdays were the days that I thought made sense. Assume nobody wanted to do performance audit on a Friday. But just looking for feedback. I personally have a conflict on the fourth Wednesday.
This is the fourth Wednesday, right?
Yeah, the fourth Wednesday. There we go. So Vice Chair Krueger.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking seems to have worked out well for the last several years, and I would think that continuing it would be beneficial.
Okay.
Did you have a conflict?
For now, the National Association of Counties Human Services and Education meetings are on the fourth Wednesday, and I'm one of the vice chairs as of last year. So that was it. But they keep moving that meeting, which makes it really hard for me on mine. So, but I've just was looking at a Wednesday, but maybe looking at the third Wednesday, if that was available, because many of us have many things that happen. And I don't know when flood control is. Are they Thursdays?
I've got, well, as long as we start at 10.
Yeah, I liked the mornings.
We got flood control on the 19th of March.
Are they on the 3rd?
Mm-hmm. I don't have it labeled further out than that.
Okay.
Thursdays I have the TAC.
Yeah, Thursdays are complicated because of several other organizations. Okay.
Third Thursday.
Second Wednesdays?
I believe there's Council of the Holes.
That's what you just said. Okay.
I have a commitment on the 20th of March, but other than that, the third Thursday could be a possibility.
Okay.
We have a special meeting of flood control Thursday.
Thursday.
But I think that's just for March.
Okay. Traditionally been on Wednesdays, I think, for a very long time. I did reach out to committee member Transu, and he's not here because he's down in Olympia, and just said now is hard for him. Committee member Lyons, Wednesdays or Thursdays, do either of those days create a barrier for you if we were to look at another day of the week?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I can follow up with members.
And I may reach out to NACO and see if, and I just don't go because I have to be here for that. So it was just a thought. If I was the only one that had a conflict, it's fine. Okay, we'll just plan on it for next month to be at our regular time, and then we'll work on shifting things. The other option would be to see if performance audit could start a little later, like 11, but then it's over like 10:30, and then I'd be able to be there for the beginning of said meeting. That would work better. Oh, we like that. Okay, 10:30.
I'm good.
And I can do two things on the same day. Okay. Well, let's tentatively plan that. We'll work with staff to make sure that actually works, and then our start times would be 10:30. Staff can set up and get ready at 10, and then everybody's out by lunch or whatever their days mean. Okay. We'll tentatively plan on that. We will adjust calendar invites moving forward and leave it the same Wednesday, so the fourth Wednesday of the month, but possibly starting at 10:30, and we will verify that, make sure there's nothing we're missing. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Is there any other business before the committee this afternoon?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Chair.
So, and then our next meeting, we'll come back to the juvenile court report or study and go from there. Okay.
And that will be 10:30. Okay.
Yes, we will adjust calendars once we confirm that that's not going to mess with anything else.
I think next month would be 10 unless you voted to establish the regular meeting time.
Oh.
Or we can do a special meeting next month, just move it to 10:30 and then vote then going
Okay.
forward.
The reason I want to make sure is we need to touch base with like PCTV and make sure that we haven't caused any issue. It's not just us. We don't. So, but I think that makes sense. But you're saying,
We could do a special meeting, just have next month's be a special meeting at 10:30.
Okay.
Vote on a permanent change going forward from there.
okay,
You want to do that?
let's do
Okay.
that. That way we can make sure. I don't want to vote on it and then find out it doesn't work. So, okay. So seeing no other business for performance audit, we are adjourned. Thank you all.